Welcome back to Billionaire Success Lessons. Today, we are telling the story of a woman whose life reminds us that success is not always about the moment you rise. Sometimes, the real test begins after the rise. Sometimes, the hardest part is not becoming powerful. The hardest part is carrying power when the ground beneath you starts to shake. This is the story of young Huiyan. And what makes her journey so meaningful is not only that she became one of the most famous businesswomen in China. It is that her story carries two very different realities at the same time. One reality is wealth, status, inheritance, and leadership at the top of one of China's biggest property empires. The other is pressure, collapse, responsibility, and the brutal emotional weight of trying to hold together something enormous in one of the most painful downturns the industry has seen in years. Her story is not just about becoming rich. It is about what happens when success meets crisis. That is why this story matters. Because a lot of people love success stories when they move upward. Far fewer study success stories when they are forced to endure downward pressure without giving up. And that is where some of life's deepest lessons live. Yang Huiyan was born in 1981 and is widely known as the daughter of Country Garden founder Yang. Public reporting says her father founded Country Garden in 1992, transferred a controlling stake to her before the company's 2007 Hong Kong listing, and she later formally took over as chair in 2023. That background matters, because many people hear a story like this and immediately reduce it to one idea: inheritance. And yes, inheritance is part of the story. But inheritance by itself is not the whole story. Inheritance may hand someone a position. It does not guarantee that they can survive the weight of that position. That is the first lesson in Yang Huiyan's life. Receiving something great is not the same as being able to carry it well. A lot of people think that if someone starts high, their path must be easy. But high places come with their own dangers. Higher expectations, greater scrutiny, less room for visible mistakes, and the constant suspicion that you did not truly earn what you were given. That creates a different kind of pressure. When someone starts from nothing, that will doubt them. When someone starts from privilege, the world also doubts them, but in a different way. And that means people like Yang Huiyan often have to fight a silent battle. not only to lead, but to prove that they are more than the story people have already written about them. Before she became chairwoman, Yang Huiyan was already one of the most closely watched women in Asian business because of her stake in Country Garden. Public profiles have long linked her fortune to the company. And in 2023, Reuters reported that she formally became chairperson after her father stepped down. That moment should have looked like triumph. A daughter stepping into formal leadership, a family successor taking the wheel, a powerful name moving into the center chair. But real life is rarely that simple, because she did not inherit the business in a calm season. She inherited leadership in a storm. And that storm matters if we want to understand the emotional truth of her story. Country Garden was once seen as one of China's strongest property developers. But the Chinese property crisis hit the sector with enormous force. Reuters reported that Country Garden later defaulted on offshore debt in 2023 and spent 2025 trying to push through a massive restructuring plan. That changes the story completely. Now, this is not only a story about wealth, it is a story about pressure. Not only about leadership, but about leadership under fire. And this is where Yang Huiyan's life begins, to offer a lesson much deeper than money. It is easy to look strong when everything is growing. The real measure of strength is what you do when things begin to break. That truth applies to companies. It applies to families. It applies to reputations. And it applies to character. A lot of people want the title. They want the chair. They want the recognition. They want the image of power. But titles feel very different when the business is under stress. When creditors are watching, when markets are losing confidence, when employees are anxious, when customers are afraid, when the future no longer feels stable. That is when leadership becomes heavy. And that is the world Yang Huiyan had to stand inside. Reuters reported in April 2025 that Country Garden reached support agreements with a key creditor group as part of an offshore restructuring effort. While Yang Huiyan agreed to convert a major shareholder loan and support additional transactions to help the plan move forward. That point matters a lot, because it shows that when the crisis deepened, she was not simply standing beside the company as a symbolic figure. She was tied directly to the effort to stabilize it. And that leads to another powerful lesson. Real responsibility begins the moment your name is no longer decoration. It begins when your decisions must carry weight. That is what separates status from burden. A name on a chart is one thing. A name connected to rescue, negotiation, and survival is something else entirely. And survival stories deserve respect, even when they do not look glamorous from the outside. In Yang Huiyan's case, the challenge was especially painful, because real estate is one of those industries where scale can feel like strength right up until the moment it becomes vulnerability. When the market is rising, scale looks unbeatable. When the market turns, scale becomes heavy. Projects become obligations. Debt becomes pressure. Expansion becomes exposure. And suddenly the thing that once made you look unstoppable becomes the thing you must struggle to carry. That is a brutal transformation. And it teaches one of the hardest lessons in business. Growth is not the same as durability. A company can become huge without becoming unbreakable. A fortune can become famous without becoming secure. A name can become powerful without becoming protected from cycles, shocks, or structural change. That is why stories like Yang Huiyan's matter so much. Because they remind us not to worship appearances too quickly. In Country Garden's 2024 annual report, Yang Huiyan wrote as chairman about stabilizing capital and debt, ensuring home delivery, and protecting operations under extremely difficult conditions. The same broad period was marked by restructuring talks, shareholder loan support, and liquidation petition delays, reported by Reuters, and that reveals something emotionally important. This is not a story about someone stepping into leadership when the path was already smooth. This is a story about someone stepping deeper into leadership when the path had become painful. And pain clarifies people. It strips away image. It strips away easy confidence. It strips away the fantasy that leadership is mainly about power. In hard seasons, leadership becomes something much more serious. It becomes emotional control. It becomes the ability to stand in front of fear without becoming fear yourself. That is why many people are unprepared for real responsibility. Because responsibility does not always arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives with crisis. And if you are still standing after that, then maybe the story was never only about inheritance after all. Maybe it was also about That is one of the deepest lessons in Yang Huiyan's journey. People may question how you began, but eventually, life tests you in ways no inheritance can answer for you. At some point, you must answer for yourself. With judgment, with decisions, with sacrifice, with staying power. That is true in business. And it is true in life. Another layer of Yang Huiyan's story is the emotional loneliness that often comes with succession. When a founder builds a company, people associate the company with that founder's hunger, vision, and original struggle. When the next generation steps in, the burden changes. Now the successor must lead while standing in the shadow of both the founder's success and the market skepticism. That is not easy. Because if things go well, people say, you inherited a winning machine. If things go badly, people say, failed the legacy. Either way, the successor has to carry an invisible comparison every single day. And that comparison can be exhausting. Yang Huiyan's life reflects that burden in a very public way. She was never just another executive. She was the founder's daughter, the controlling shareholder, the public face of a family empire. And then the chairwoman in the middle of a crisis. That means her story is not just about real estate. It is also about expectation. And expectation is heavy. It can crush people who live too much inside other people's opinions. But it can also refine people who choose to stay serious under pressure. And that is why this story belongs on Billionaire Success Lessons. Because success lessons are not only found in clean victories. Sometimes they are found in the harder question. How do you keep going when the world that once admired your eyes starts doubting your future? That is a more useful lesson than most people realize. Because almost everyone, in some form, will face that question. Maybe not with billions of dollars. Maybe not with headlines. Maybe not with creditors. But everyone faces a season when something they thought was secure begins to shake. A business, a career, a family role, a reputation, a dream. And in those moments, you learn who you are. Yang Huiyan's story shows that there is a kind of courage that does not look dramatic. It does not look like a speech. It does not look like a movie scene. It looks like staying at the table, continuing negotiations, backing the company, carrying public pressure, trying to stabilize what others think may already be lost. That kind of courage is quiet, but it is real, and quiet courage often changes more than loud confidence ever does. There is also another hard lesson in her life. Sometimes the life you inherit is not the life you would have chosen, but it still becomes the life you must answer for. That is maturity. Maturity is not controlling every condition. Maturity is responding honorably to the conditions you actually have. And that is why this story can still inspire people, even though it includes struggle, uncertainty, and decline. Because inspiration is not only about rising, it is also about carrying responsibility, carrying pressure, carrying a name, carrying a broken season without disappearing inside it. That matters. For anyone watching right now who feels overwhelmed by a burden they did not fully choose, there is something worth hearing here. You may not control the conditions. You may not control the timing. You may not control the opinions of the world. But you can still control your seriousness, your steadiness, your willingness to act with responsibility, even when the outcome is not guaranteed. That is what real character looks like. And that is why Yang Huiyan's story is more than a story of fortune lists and property charts. It is a story about what happens when leadership becomes personal, when crisis becomes public, when inheritance becomes responsibility, when status stops feeling glamorous and starts feeling heavy. That is where the lessons begin to deepen. So when you think about Yang Huiyan, do not think only about rankings or headlines. Think about the daughter of a founder, carrying a legacy in public. Think about the woman who rose to formal leadership in 2023. Just as the property crisis deepened around her company. Think about the pressure of trying to stabilize capital, debt, operations, and home delivery while markets question whether survival itself is possible. Think about the burden of leadership when your name is tied not just to wealth, but to whether a giant organization can keep breathing through one of the hardest periods in its history. That is the story of Yang Huiyan. Not just a story of billions. A story of inheritance. A story of responsibility. A story of pressure. A story of and a story of proving that sometimes the deepest success lesson is not how high you rise, but how steadily you stand when everything around you becomes uncertain.